Sorry, I had a hairball. What's up?
It's Pearly. Tier list. Yeah. We're talking about peak Yu-Gi-Oh performance. And you know I'm not biased. I'm putting Pearly above S tier. So, what is it? What are we dealing with here? YCS Bologna happened. And that's very a funny format because a lot of cool decks played. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about what I expect because of YCS Bologna. Because there's a lot of cool decks. All right, let's talk about Branded first. Branded peak clearing. I think at this point, Branded is the perfect deck to incentivize the point of it's fine to have a game plan, but what else do you have? They still don't do enough in this format. It's really a combo format still that relies heavily on you opening up to 2 interaction cards every game. Otherwise, your opponent just kind of plays infinitely. But Branded's a bit more special because in certain hands, Branded could just fully lose to only 1 interaction, and the rest of its hands it loses to 2. So it has a very poor playing performance against it, especially because everybody has the target of Branded Fusion being designed to be the target called Branded Fusion. But you could still technically top. I could see this theoretically still going pretty hard into like formats. Centurion is also clearing. I think Centurion at this point, after all of the Valiant Smashers, like Cope and everything people have been doing, I think Valiant Smashers is fine. I think Centurion is a decent deck. It's just its main game plan right now is King Calamity. That's what it's called. Like, it's a fine deck, but if you're playing Centurion, you could play much better Synchro packages in other decks. Like, Synchron itself actually could theoretically be a better engine than Centurion right now. Chimera, aka the Illusion archetype pile, it's falling off. I think it had that wave of new deck syndrome we all want in our lives back in Kashtira format, and that's fully died off, and now it's at the point of people realizing it's just Branded Fusion again, but even worse because you can't just use Foolish Burial anymore. Do I think it can top? Absolutely. I think really good players can get this deck to do crazy things. The issue is that we're also learning how to play against the deck now. Cyber Dragon, you're a goblin if you play Cyber Dragon at this point. Darkwold's crazy if you want to play Solitaire. Everybody knows that. If you get stopped, however, Darkwold has a very tough time continuing to play. Exo Sister. I'd say Exo Sister is in a fine spot right now. A lot of decks that are actually like pretty high up on the tier list actually mess with their graveyard pretty effectively to where theoretically Exo Sisters could activate their effects pretty reasonably and pop off. The issue with Exo Sister is a lot like another deck that we'll get up to shortly, where Floodgates are the win con sometimes. But for now, Exo Sister is fine. Fire Kings. If you haven't watched my budget breakdown video yet, please do. It has no views. Come on, please. I think Fire Kings are solid. I think they are a very good deck this format. I wouldn't say they are the cream of the crop yet, but I would definitely say that this deck definitely is not something you should be sleeping on. This is something that you should expect to be dangerous. Blue is falling off so hard at this point. Back in the day, we were all scared of Impin, but at this point, we've all realized we can just summon a lot of different things to just proc around. I think Flu is a competent deck. I think its solid game plan is there. I just think a lot of decks at this point can play around Flu. Horus Piles. This is definitely a testing the water. I think Horus Piles are at the point where they are very interesting on how they're developing. I don't think they're there fully yet, but I think if you're someone who wants to be testing with Horus, you should be trying this deck out as soon as possible. Infernoble. I think Infernoble is a deck in this format that is genuinely scary. I think this deck is a threat that people are having to actively account for and be scared of, because without it, your options for top are a little bit scarce in comparison. I do think Infernoble clears a lot of decks out from the bottom that just like rely on certain cards activating or not. And when you have a super synchro combo pile, I think it is at that point where it is crazy not to say this is one of the best decks in the game. There is a few decks that peak it better. Kashtira. Remember when we were all scared of Kashtira? Me either. Labyrinth. Whoa, Labyrinth was crazy in Bologna, actually. I think that this deck is solid. I think it's a very scary option, but I don't think it's as great as the other two in solid option already. I think it's very reasonable for where it is as the actual control deck, but I can also very reasonably see most decks above it, easily defeating it because it just outplays them. The Visas pile is what we got to call it at this point. It is Monadium, it is Scareclaw, it is Tearlament, it is Kashtira, it is everything in one generic pile, and it's peak. It's reasonably one of the best decks in the game. You can't sit a deck down in front of me that says you need to have 2 hard negates in your hand to stop me and not reasonably think it's one of the best decks in the game right now. I genuinely think when a ban list eventually happens in January to February, this deck will be hit in some way. If I was playing this right now, I would be scared. Marine Cess is fine. It's a very straightforward line. You know what you're ending on. Your opponent knows what you're ending on. There's very little divergence you really go into with the deck, but for what it is, it's a very competent deck that's cleared previously multiple times and can still clear today. Mathmech is a deck that exists. I think it's fine for where it is, but I would also, if I were you, just say don't bother with it. I think at this point, they need to either semi-circular or fully unlimited. It is the point of Salamangreat where the deck is fine, technically, where it is. It was our only real Cybers pile. Makonko has surprisingly very much grown on a lot of players. From this deck being competent to actually being very interesting to play. I do like the idea of a lot of the deck's plan just being summoning this specific monster out with a bunch of equipped cards, being like a snatch steal and other stuff like that. However, I'm not going to sit here and say it's a good game strategy when your entire deck relies on a single monster that says you cannot target Makonko card. Punk is clearing. Punk, even still to this day, Punk is a very competent deck that can very confidently do what it wants to do with no fucks given. If you don't have 2 interactions to stop Punk like the rest of decks, I would say you should be worried. In fact, it is almost Dark World's level of it not giving a shit and just playing anyway. That being said, Gold Pride is definitely the reason I can say that at this point. Because, oh no, you negated my fusion summon with my level 3 monster. I guess I'll just go into fucking carry for Gold Pride's XYs and just casually just do the Gold Pride line now. Pearly! Surprisingly, this deck is gorgeous. Let's not get that twisted. I look amazing in every photo of myself. But Pearly taking a big dip in how many people are actually playing the deck. Because of that, now Pearly has actively had the people who commit to the deck, much like myself, looking at the deck in more unique ways. Ghost Trick Pearly is so fun. If you have not played that on Master Duel yet, I would 110% recommend you play it. In TCG, just as fun. It's so good. It's so fun. Rescue Ace. We saw this deck in the finals. Very scary. This deck is peak? Absolutely. I think this deck is the most terrifying thing in all time. I would not be shocked if later on we see either Hydrant or Turbulence limited because of how consistent this deck is right now. Frightfur? I'm not going to talk about Frightfur. Rika. Holy shit, Rika. Rika. Europe's #1 problem with reading cards. I love this deck. It's very funny, but I do not want to see this deck at full power anymore. There is no way they are going to sit here and say Rika is perfectly fine and then limit fucking Mathmech Circular. I can see Rika Princess being hit soon. Dragon Link. Dragon Link is fine. I don't want to talk about Dragon Link, honestly. Because of the Chaos Space limit, deck's just kind of really mid and really not interesting to play. Runic. I'm going to pile all the Runic decks together, including Stun for this. They are clearing. I could confidently say Runic can feasibly do a lot that people forget about, and it is confidently so splashable that it does not matter. They could limit Fountain and this deck could still be seen very confidently. Now, would I want them to limit Fountain? No. Salamangreat. I've built this deck in paper. I can confidently tell you it clears. Salamangreat is confidently a deck I could feasibly see winning events in the future. Right now it is fine and can definitely top, but I cannot see it actually doing a lot more than that. I think Salad is just a very fun link pile, but until you do that, the deck just spins its wheels for a while until you get Nibiru'd. Swordsoul. Whoa, Swordsoul is crazy mid. I like Swordsoul. It's such a fun synchro pile that can reasonably do what it needs to do without worrying about much. Sword Soul unfortunately has the problem of existing in a world where Rescue Ice and Vanadium are objectively better. It's an interesting deck, but it doesn't do as much as other decks should. Same thing with Vanquish Souls. This deck did really well in OCG. It did crazy in Master Duel. Why is it not doing much in TCG? Answer: it is the only format where Max C is not a threat. Exclusively because of Max C, this deck is not a problem. A deck that's a little bit more talkative though, Tier Limit. Damn, this deck, even after all the hits it got to be Dragon Rollered, is still a deck that I am perfectly capable of saying is scary. Phantom Knights. Is this really surprising? Every format, Phantom Knights does something. It's always here in some way or another. It's always terrifying what it's going to do, but it doesn't really do much else than that. In fact, I could confidently see Phantom Knights topping regionals and stuff, but I can't see it reasonably doing much else. Unchained. Literally the week after this deck came out, we were ready to have this shit banned. If you don't expect this deck to be hit, you are out of your mind. That's a second Vanquish Souls. What's that doing here? Is it Vanquish Souls control? Finally, zombies. Zombies are fine. I think zombies at this point are just an okay pile that you could theoretically play. And there you have it. The peak Yu-Gi-Oh tier list for December format. Where is it going to go in the next year? Probably somewhere better than where we are, honestly. If you like this video, please subscribe. I'm going to try and do more stuff like this. I'll do more fun decks and stuff like that every Monday. And just do my own like series on Fridays with Structure Showdown. I do hope you guys support me with all my other stuff. Thank you. Bye.